Okay, traffic congestion, cost of living, homelessness, these are all issues that most big cities in North America struggle with. But this morning, we're taking a look at what's going on specifically in Toronto and why it has Nicole MacIntyre, the editor-in-chief of the Toronto Star, saying she's falling out of love with the city. Anne-Marie recently sat down with MacIntyre to chat about why she feels that way and how to fix the problem.
So earlier in January, you published this opinion piece that started with this very provocative sentence. And I'm going to read it for anybody who didn't get a chance to read it. You wrote, quote, "I have a confession that no editor of the Toronto Star should ever put in writing. I am falling out of love with this city." Obviously, this is a catchy way of promoting the series that you are running. But what was the genesis of that notion that you would put it into print?
Yeah, you know, can I admit that initially that line went even farther and said, I think I'm crossing that fine line between love and hate.
Oh, wow.
And someone's like, do you really want to go that far? But the fact is that is how I often feel lately. And it was coming up more and more in the conversations that I was having with my friends or even casually in the newsroom. And I said, I think we need to actually say this out loud and talk about it. And I was nervous because, you know, I don't think it's great that the editor of the Toronto Star is falling out of love with the city. Overwhelmingly, though, people have said they're feeling it too, that the city is hard to live in right now.
Well, you definitely picked up on a point, because having this conversation with different Torontonians, you know, in anticipation of this interview, immediately everyone goes, yeah, me too.
Yeah.
And I was surprised to see that people really are feeling it. Is it the city they're falling out of love with? Is it the problems? What is it?
I think this city has become harder to live in, particularly in the last. I say last year was the year that broke us. Mm-hmm. It feels like we're living.
It broke us. Why?
I sometimes feel like we're like in a video game in this city, and each day it adds another like challenge of like, okay, you thought that was the way you could get to work. Well, today the subway's down and the streetcar is delayed and traffic is bad. Like, I feel like we keep making it harder and harder. The cost of living stuff, you know, if you live in a city, you live here because of the opportunities, you live here because of the amenities. When you can barely afford your rent or your mortgage, you don't get to enjoy those things.
Right.
So what are you enjoying about living in a city that you can't get around? And you're also seeing so many people around you struggling. You know, we're seeing a lot of people in this city struggling. Yeah. And I think increasingly it's like, what is the good right now in the city? Mm-hmm. But I see that people want to find it, but they're having a hard time.
Yeah, Toronto's the good. Listen, there's people from coast to coast who we all know that, you know, everybody hates Toronto. That's the thing. I grew up out west. I grew up saying it and hearing it. You know, have since come to love the city, worked locally for a long time. Is this just a Toronto problem, or do you see this as relatable to cities like Vancouver, Montreal, Calgary?
Yeah. So in a second, I'm going to ask you if you still love the city.
Okay.
But first, I would say, like, I think some of the problems are all cities in North America are struggling with this right now. Cost of living, homelessness, mental illness, a lot of those things, racism, hate, a lot of those things we're seeing many cities deal with. I think there are some things that are uniquely Toronto right now. Mm-hmm. That being congestion. We have the worst congestion of any city in North America. I think that is the thing that are bringing people to their knees right now, that they just find the city impossible to get around. So.
And it's not even the inconvenience, but it's the time.
Yes.
It takes time out of your day.
Well, and then how can you enjoy some of those things that are important in life if it's taking you twice as long to get home? Or even, like, I joke, I live on the east side, and I've had to say to my friends on the west, I think it's over. Like, I don't think we can be friends anymore because I would need to take a whole day in order to go see you.
I've worked locally in the city for a really long time, but we were commuters. So we live just outside the city, and I will say, I used to come into the city all the time to do things. I will not now, because it's going to take me too long to get in, to get out.
Yeah, and I think that it's more than just a frustration. Like, it actually makes people unhappy in their lives when it takes them twice as long to get home, when they don't feel like they can go see their friends, when they don't feel like they can go to things. It's more than an inconvenience.
So then let's look at solutions. The series is called Toronto the Better. What are some of the solutions? How are you going to find them?
So we're focusing on, I said in my launch column that I wanted to look at solutions that are collective solutions and individual solutions. And I want to be optimistic in this series because we know the problems. That's the role of the media. We report all the time on the problems. That can lead us to a place I think people just think, well, I have to leave. And I've seen my friends do that they're leaving. I don't want that to be how this ends for me, that I feel like I have to leave this city. As the editor of the paper, I also don't want to see that many people feel that's the only way. So we're going to focus on some of the big things that need fixing. And that's about like cost of living, that's about transportation, but we're also going to focus on things that the science of happiness tell us lead you to have a good life.
Oh, like what are those things? That's interesting.
Well, so this is like a personal like obsession of mine. I love reading about the science of happiness. I always joke, does that sound really sad that I say that? But we know that your day-to-day happiness, in fact, your commute has a big part of it, that your interactions with your coworkers, your interactions with your family, those things have a lot in your day-to-day happiness. But overall, when you think, do you have a good life and your quality of life, it really is about the quality of your relationships. Do you have purpose and meaning? Are you healthy? And so the series is looking at, we're not going to solve this city's transportation problems in a year or 2 years.
Yeah.
It's going to be a long time.
Yeah.
But could we be doing things in our day-to-day lives that would make this city more enjoyable? And that comes out of something very personal for me, in that I was recognizing that I was really not enjoying my life in Toronto.
When did this start happening? Like
So
post-pandemic? Was it before?
Post-pandemic. Also, at the point I was in my early 40s, the classic time of life where you're like, okay, like what am I doing with my life and whatever. And when I was reading about the science of happiness and about the quality of relationships, I set a New Year's resolution that I was going to go out to expand my social circle that year. And so I went and joined a softball team. I am not athletic. I did not know the game. And I now have this amazing team of people who are my friends, and they make me enjoy this city. When I go and spend a night with them, it makes me forget about all of the problems of this city and enjoy the people of this city. Because I think ultimately, if you live in a city, you have to live in a city for the people, because that's what a city is. It's just full of people. And so this series is going to try to focus on how can we improve our relationships, our experience in the city. So we're launching things where we're going to actually try to connect people in the city. We're launching things about walking, and actually are going to organize walks for people to get together in the city. We are focusing on volunteering. So that's the number one thing that you could do to change your life tomorrow. The science of happiness says that. The number one thing you could do tomorrow is to volunteer. It helps others, but you can be quite selfish about it, that it's actually the number one thing that can improve your life.
Yeah.
So this series is going to cover a lot of the big things, the urban planning things of what should City Hall be doing to make this city more enjoyable to live in.
Yeah.
But it is also going to try to inspire and encourage people to do things in their own lives that will make this city better.
I love that. I'm a big believer in that. And I think post-pandemic, a lot of people thought, I always call it tapping your joy. Where can you find joy to start tapping that well? But I want to talk about the big issues for just a second. You guys have just had a tax hike as Torontonians. But also in this city, I think that there's something unique about this city that you don't see anywhere else in Canada. And that is the fact that you have a mayor and a premier who both used to work in city council. So I see Premier Ford, as he is right now, very involved in issues of the city that in a way that he's not in North Bay or in Ottawa. Does that have any kind of impact, positive or negative, on the city? Not him per se, but having a provincial body that involved?
Yeah, I mean, I think it can have an impact if people feel like their problems are getting caught in political fights that never end. Because I think that actually has been the story of Toronto. We have known for a very long time.
Subway lines.
Exactly.
LRTs. So many, Ontario Science Centre. These are all things that the province has gotten involved in, and then there's, at the end of the day, wasted money.
Well, and I think even outside of the province, City Council for years knew that there were problems, but could not get together to find solutions. And so we would see something move forward and then it get pulled back. And I think that adds to that frustration of people. One of the words that people always say to me is that the city's dysfunctional. And I think that flows from, can our political leaders work together to actually find some solutions that are going to happen pretty quickly? Because I also think it's pretty urgent, the need to start moving Toronto to a better place.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing homelessness always existed in the city, but we're seeing it in more and new places.
Yeah.
More in public transit. No room in emergency centers. So it's on the sidewalk. It's you're interacting and interfacing with it more often. Can I ask you about your career for just a moment?
Yeah, for sure.
What I love about your story is that you started out as an intern in your early 20s at the Toronto Star, and here you are, the editor-in-chief of the same paper, one of the most powerful papers in the country. What does that feel like to have gone from there to now, and what advice do you have for anybody who's starting out now in their early 20s in journalism?
Yeah, I am very, I would have never imagined that's what happened. Like, I can remember when I came to Toronto, I'm from a small town in Nova Scotia. when I came to Toronto and was an intern at the Toronto Star, I had never even been on a subway. Like I was just, and I could not believe that I worked at the Toronto Star. I can remember that day. That's when the Star was at One Yonge, being outside, looking up and being like, I can't believe I have a job at the Toronto Star. And you know, when I left there and went and worked at other papers, I read that paper every single day. And I feel like it's where I fell in love with journalism. Yeah. So now to get to come back to the Star at a time where I think the city really needs a great city newspaper, it feels like a dream. Like really, I got the job last year. At the end of the year, as you sit and think about, you're like, what an incredible thing. Like I truly feel so grateful that I got it. I feel a huge responsibility too.
Sure.
I think everyone knows the media, it's been challenging for the media. And I feel a responsibility to help the Star be great, for us to have an impact on the city.
One more question about journalism, which fits into what we're talking about in the era that we're living in now, and this is mis and disinformation.
Yeah.
And how journalism is changed. We have smaller budgets and smaller newsrooms and more news to cover and less people to do it.
Yeah, that is a real challenge and it worries me. You asked me what my advice is for people. The other day we had a session in the newsroom talking about how to deal with polarization. And we played a clip from a Ted Lasso in which he's telling his lesson and he says, he's quoting one woman, be curious, not judgmental. Yeah. That is something that I would say to young journalists and that I say to the newsroom. This is a moment where we need to be curious and not judgmental. And we are here to guide people to the truth. And we have a lot of rebuilding of public trust to do. The best way to do that is by following that. Be curious, not judgmental.
I teach that to my kids. Be critical thinkers, not critical people.
Yeah.
There is a difference.
That's such a good, yeah, that's great.
All right. Nicole, it was great to meet you. Good luck with making Toronto better.
Thank you for having me.